मानुषी के मित्रों को मेरा नमस्कार. Friends, today we have a very special guest, the one and only Rajiv Malhotra of Infinity Foundation. He also happens to be a very, very special dear friend of mine. And we've known each other for 3 decades at least now. Yes, Rajiv, 3 decades. Most of you would have heard his lectures on YouTube. Many of you have read his pioneering research, his path-breaking books. I too have benefited a great deal, not only by reading his books, by listening to his lectures, but also our personal interactions, which I cherish deeply. I'm really honored that Rajiv Malhotra has chosen to speak to me after 3 months of convalescence. He's undergone a very major spinal surgery, which laid him up in bed for 3 months. This is his first sitting up, facing the camera interview. And Rajiv had promised me that once he gets better, I'll be the first person he will talk to. So we bring you Rajiv Malhotra in a very unusual mode. Today, I've told Rajiv, I requested Rajiv to speak about his own life journey. You may have heard of it in bits and parts here and there when Rajiv talks about what brought him to the path that he chose after a certain age in his 40s. But today it'll be more about Rajiv the person, what has shaped his life, what has made him who is, the one and only intellectual warrior that we have today, who has actually now encouraged so many others to follow his path. So Rajiv, let's start by you giving a report on your health status. I'm sure your countless well-wishers, followers would like to know what was this surgery about and how you coped with it, because it was really serious.
So first of all, thank you for having me, Madhu. You're a wonderful friend. We've known each other, as you said, for a very long time. And I must say you're one of the most persistent, consistent, hardworking, diligent persons in this space, in this cause. And one of the very few that can claim to be both a scholar and an activist. 99% of the people who are activists are not scholars. They're quoting here and there, trying to claim that they know something which they're just quoting. And they're not even quoting accurately. So the superficial nature turns the discussions into emotions because they cannot back it up with substantial facts which they haven't researched on their own. And then there are some people who are researchers, but they don't come out, they don't have a good presence on media. Very few people are both taking the research aspect, which takes a lot of hard work. And research means good, solid, original research books. You've done that a lot, and then you've also taken it into the public square as an activist. And then the third aspect is building an institution. Manushi is a remarkable institution, has been there for a long time, was there long before Infinity Foundation. I got a lot of inspiration from you as a one-person fighter. So there's a lot we have in common. I admire that.
Really honored, Rajiv. And your friendship is one of the most precious gifts of my life.
And I would say the same. So the medical problem has been there for all my life, but kept getting worse. So it's sort of like, imagine you're not in pain and before surgery, there's no pain and there's no life-threatening situation. And yet you choose to go for one of the most serious surgeries possible. The first question is, why would you do that? If there is no problem, why do you do that? And the answer is that that my condition was being monitored and was getting worse every year. I've been to Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and this, that, all kind of famous places. Half the doctors said, we should operate on you. The sooner the better. The other half would say, don't do it. It's too risky, dangerous. The magnitude of work to be done. and the benefit won't be that great because, you know, you're at a certain age anyway. Just put up with it and just continue. So I continued all these years with physical activities, kept myself going. But it was getting to a point where it was very clear that the rate of deterioration means that within a few years, I'll have to stop working. So I had gone to all the yoga places. I had gone to all the naturopathy places, from Jindal on to all these ashrams, tried all kind of Ayurveda. So there's no modality that I hadn't tried, of course. So I decided I'll go for this for one reason. I may be going through a lot of discomfort, pain, whatever, for a temporary period, which could be 6 months. But in the end, once I'm recovered, I'll have 10 to 15 years of new working life. And I did it because I do have 10 or 15 years.
I insist it has to be at least 20 years, Rajiv. I know how many books are in the pipeline, and not less than 20. Now that you've undergone this major surgery, I hope, you know, famous lines of Browning, grow old along with me. The best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made. And I'm sure the next 2 decades of your life are going to be even more productive than the preceding decades.
These are good wishes. And I'll tell you, Infinity Foundation started out as sort of my personal cause and my swadharma. I needed a house and institution to do that. And I didn't build an in-house team. I didn't think I was going to groom people for the next generation. I didn't have all those ideas. And so first we were outsourcing all the work to university people in America. And you were part of some conferences we had in the early days. And it was clear that the university people sitting in all these famous places are not going to change their view just because we gave them grants. They're going to take our money, they're going to thank us for it and keep doing the same work. And you have to be very sharp to point it out and argue with them, which is what I was doing. Then I started bringing people in India into it. And then India is also very complicated. There is this left wing, right wing, political correctness, all kind of things going on. So I've been increasing the scope of Infinity Foundation. And now I believe that my work is not completed just by putting out a whole lot of books and a lot of research, which I'll keep doing anyway. But I also need to train a certain number of young people to continue the work. So we have on our payroll about 10 people or more in India, actually more. And we have a certain number of people in the US. These are the people that we fund from all the funding and donations we get. I'm not on the payroll, I don't need to be. But the idea is to fund these people, the young team, to do research. They're helping me in research. They're as research assistants, so then they gradually become their own researchers, scholars, in the editing, in the video, making animations, translating into different languages, marketing, all these digital marketing. So we're building a machinery. We're building one-of-a-kind machinery.
Like me, Rajiv, you come from a family of partition refugees, and your family too, like mine, came and settled down in Delhi. I would like you to tell that story, because the little glimpses I have of that tell me there's a lot to be learned from that. Was it easy for your family to find their feet and start afresh? And did that experience play a major role in shaping you?
Yeah, that was one of several things. My different experiences, but I'll get into the detail on the partition one. My experiences were basically from childhood. I had a scientific, temperament to look, inquire, argue, dig up details, have a lot of data. That kind of a quest for a scientific understanding was there part of me from the very beginning. And another one, my dharma was very strong because of my mother, who, by the way, just passed away this year, very, very sad, at the age of 95. For the last 40 years, never missed a year. I went 3-4 times a year to India to be with her. She's the person who's shaped me the most. And this year, because of COVID, for the last 14 months, I could not visit her. That was very traumatic. And, that's a whole tragedy in its own right, because she was an amazing person who spent her whole life as a physician, as a medical doctor, as a gold medalist from the entire pre-partition, medical system multiple campuses.
Where was this, in Lahore? Where did she do her study?
She studied in Ludhiana. So there were three medical colleges: Ludhiana, Lahore, and one other in the pre-partition. Big Punjab was huge, like 4 times its current size. Punjab was huge in those days. So she was the gold medalist, and then that made women candidates get in more easily, because until that time, hardly any women were allowed or brought into admission for medical colleges, very few of them. But when there was this gold medalist woman, then it opened the floodgates. So, but she always worked for no money. She always worked to help out people. She was doing fundraising to build a Gangaram hospital. She was involved in committees in Delhi, during her prime life, she knew all the medical people in the establishment, always trying to do something for the medical system in Delhi. But imagine after doing so much for so many people in the medical community for free, when it was her need to get an oxygen cylinder, she was not able to get one. She was taken in the back of a Maruti to 5 hospitals in the middle of the night because she was gasping for breath. So there were some people, some staff, my brother driving, and they went to hospital 1. They said, we don't have a place, go to this one. They'll have a place, so you go running there, then they send you there. So she went to many places, and in the end, she breathed her last in the parking lot of Max Hospital, where she was so well known. But this is the middle of the night, chaos, confusion. And if you don't have pull or contacts, you don't get in. She had all the pull and all the contacts, but she didn't want to use it on herself. So that is what happened, which is very, very sad. But I guess, the weight on me is that I wasn't there. All she wanted was just see me one more time. And no amount of Zooms and all that is good enough compared to, being there with somebody that cares so much for you and you care for them. And I wasn't able to do that. So that's one part of the story, which is I still have to digest it, process it. It'll take me a long time. But to go back to what were the influences, my mother was a very strong influence in terms of inculcating very deep dharmic, interest in learning, reading. We used to go to Ramakrishna Mission. We knew the head of that. Then later on, we knew Swami Chinmayananda. I used to go for that. We went to several Tirth Yatras. I was an avid student of Gita and Upanishads, even as a
From
teenager.
your childhood?
From my childhood. As a student in high school, I was reading Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, which is a very heavy book. And I keep reading it till now. I keep getting new meanings every time. And I must have read the Bhagavad Gita over 100 times, because every time I pick up and read it, new insights come. Those shlokas are written as so many levels that each time you go back and read it, you get new meanings out of it. And similarly, all the Upanishads. We used to have a lot of katha, Ramayana katha in the house for 30 days. We would have an Akhand part where for 24 hours, everybody will be nonstop doing the Mahamrityunj in the family. So we were my mother's from an Arya Samaj, and she knows all the havans and all the yagnas, all the Arya Samaj stuff. We did it as a family. But she was very eclectic and very, multifaceted. So being Arya Samaj didn't keep her from really going deep into Vedanta, going deep into Bhakti. I know Arya Samajis are not supposed to do these things, but she was not a fully compliant Arya Samaji. She was doing all that stuff. And till the end, she supported the Arya Samaj Mandir in the back of her house. She put up something for girls to be educated there, for some X-ray machines so that people could come and get X-rays, building some hall and all that. So she was supporting all kind of causes for all her life across the whole spectrum of Vedic tradition.
But your own education was in a missionary school and then
Yes.
St. Stephen's.
So, it's very interesting. My mother had this very westernized education as a doctor and a very Indian life as a spiritual person, extremely traditional and extremely modern. So I remember in 1960, I was like 10 years old or something. She decided she's going to drive a car, which was unusual for women in those days. So she got driving lessons, drove a car. And so she was the woman among all these, her age bracket, in those days, who was driving a car. And it was a novelty for women to be driving a car. So she was a pioneer in many ways, as a woman. So I don't think she would call herself a feminist or something, but she was certainly ahead of her time in asserting women's rights, and she would go and fight. I was witness to a lot of drama, a lot of fights where, I've seen you, Madhu, have some of these fights, but my mother was, in those days when it wasn't common or popular or easy, she would be alone in a room and just take on all these people and argue her point of view. So I learned a lot of these kind of skills. I learned courage, I learned bravery, I learned the kshatriyata, I learned the intellectual sharpness that she had.
And what about your father?
So my father was very different. So my father, okay, now the Lahore is the father's story, the Ludhiana is the mother's story. So the Lahore story is, my father came from a family of very wealthy bankers. They were the pioneers in creating the Punjab National Bank. The Punjab National Bank was created by people who were a lot of Arya Samaj people in Punjab decided that the funding of their causes, their ventures was in the hands of British banks or banks that were influenced by British or other communities in India, but not the Punjab people. So Punjab National Bank was set up to fund our causes, to fund our entrepreneurs, and to fund the nationalist movement. The Punjab National Bank was heavily involved in the funding. So some of the relatives in my family were associated with Bhagat Singh. In fact, when I was a kid, they would tell us stories about their involvement and things of that. So they were tough guys in this. Now, my father, because the family was very wealthy, they lived in Lahore in a huge mansion in a very kind of good lifestyle, big, lot of servants, lot of cars. In those days it was Chevrolets and all that from USA. So when partition happened, people in Lahore didn't expect that Lahore will be part of Pakistan. They thought that the boundary will be different because Lahore had majority Hindus. But the last minute, Mountbatten, Nehru and Jinnah said, okay, let's just give it to Pakistan. So when the partition happened, these people read the newspaper the next morning. It said, this is the boundary. And my father's family said, oh my God, we are in Pakistan. So, but then Gandhi started confusing things, saying the partition is temporary, don't move, don't relocate, stay where you are. So people were in double mind. Should we stop? People said, okay, let's stay and this violence will end and we'll be reunited again. Then there were calls from Jinnah that, Hindus don't have to leave. There were calls from Gandhi, Muslims don't have to leave India. So there were some people saying, okay, even if there is a long-term Pakistan, we'll be fine here. We have too much to lose if we left. We have too much money, property. So, there was confusion. There was no clarity. There was no population transfer. There was nothing organized. There was no time given. It was like, okay, it's done. Now you're on your own. So days went by. My parents continued living in Lahore. My dad living in Lahore. My mother was expecting the eldest son at that time.
But they were already married to each other?
Yeah, they're married. And my mother was with her family, with her parents in Ludhiana, because she was having a baby. She was a new baby. That was her first child. And they lost that baby. That would have been my eldest brother because of all this stuff that was going on in those days. So, my father was a young man, engineer from Government College, Lahore, living in the extended family in Lahore. And the rest of them were big time bankers, right at the top of Punjab National Bank. So they were a very wealthy family. Now, when the partition happened, as days went by, the violence increased, didn't decrease, it increased. And so things became more and more dangerous. And then stories would come out that some rich guy, some rich Hindu his house has been, raided, and they've taken away all the people and killed them and taken all the money. So this would scare everybody. So my father's family decided that things were getting very rough and they ought to leave. So this is a very interesting story with many parts to it. So they booked a Dakota plane, private plane, to take them from Lahore to Amritsar. That it's not an
So
easy.
it's only about 35 kilometers.
Yeah, but then the driving is very difficult.
Yeah.
So they wanted to take this plane. I think it was Amritsar. I'm not sure which place in India, but they had flight to some place in India. In those days, getting a private jet is not an easy thing. But they were very rich people. Now they loaded up the cars to go to the airport in Lahore, and an anonymous call comes, says, we know you are escaping, but you will not escape. In other words, a threat that you're trying to run away, but you'll be killed. That kind of a threat. My grandfather, my father's father, made the call that, you know what, we should not, we are all loaded up, cars are packed. So instead of driving to the airport because somebody has found out, I mean, they wanted to leave quietly and secretly, very, very early hours of the morning in this private jet, private Dakota. But somebody has found out, and so maybe they will not be allowed to leave. So he said, why don't we drive to Amritsar? Why don't we go by car? So what happened is they did not show up for the flight, and the charter was sold to someone else. And sure enough, that family was killed.
How? The plane was sabotaged?
No. Before they could take off, that family was killed. Some guys in the local airport, they went and killed that family. So this came in the newspapers in India that wealthy family fails to escape, killed and all that. So my mother and her family thought that it's my father's family that are being killed. Because, there's no phones in those days. You can't just sort of, the cell phones and all, you can't communicate so easily. So my father and his family were meanwhile in cars trying to drive to India, and it took them a long time just to drive those few miles to the Indian border because of all the chaos and people getting killed along the way. So they were taking that rough road journey, and they gave up the plane, and the other people who took over the plane got killed. And so my mother's family read this in the newspapers, and it started mourning that my father and his family are dead. That is what they assumed. But meanwhile, my father and his family were, if you had a car that wanted to go over to across the border, you would join other cars for safety and make a convoy. So the convoy may start with 100 cars, and they would all go together, helping each other. But the convoy would keep getting smaller and smaller because people would keep getting killed along the way. Mobs would come, they would block the car, and they would stand on the car and jump this, that, all kind of stuff, open the windows, they would take the people out, because they knew these people who are leaving are taking money, taking jewelry with them. They're taking whatever wealth they can take. So each car was worth some money. So they would go kill the people or throw them out and take the money. This is how the convoy, a convoy that started with 100 people, 100 cars, would be lucky if at the other end, 10, 15 of them reached. So my dad's family was in these cars. One of the reasons they survived is because my grandfather had a beard. So he looked like one of those beard guys. And he knew Pashto, he knew Urdu, he knew all those languages. And he was this very tough talking, like, hey, kya kar rahe ho? Get out of the way. He would tell these people. They would think he's one of the Muslim leaders, and they would clear the way. And then the driver on the other side of the front seat would throw 1 rupee notes. He had been given a whole lot of 1 rupee notes. So each time there's a gang or mob, you throw these rupee notes far away, they'll go chasing the money and leave your car alone, so you can just go zoom ahead until the next mob comes. So it's like from one mob to the next, you have to keep doing until you reach the border. So it took them a very long time, but they managed to cross the border. Some got killed. My father and some immediate family, they were okay. So they managed to cross the border, and then they kept driving. They reached Ludhiana, which is again some miles from the border. When they reached Ludhiana and they entered this school building where my mother's father is principal of this Arya school system, Arya Samaj school system. He was a principal and a math teacher. So when they walked into this big bungalow where my mother and all her family were staying, and these few cars came in with my father and all his family, and they hadn't shaved, they hadn't eaten properly. It's like people coming from the dead. It's like my mother's family thought, my God, they're back. And we thought they're gone. So it was a very traumatic experience from that point of view. A very interesting part of the story is this. The family member in my father's side, who was the head of this Punjab National Bank, he was married to my father's sister. He was a very big shot tycoon kind of a guy in those days, a financial, big shot. He had a Muslim friend in Delhi who was also a very rich man, who owned what is now the USIS building, the 1012 Haley Road complex. I was raised there, so I know that building. And I'll tell you how I was raised there. That building and a few surrounding buildings were one big building belonging to this guy. Later on, these were broken up. One part, the main building, the USIS bought, and the other building, some other people bought. But in those days, it was a huge, huge complex with this building in the center. So my uncle, who was this Punjab National Bank rich guy, and this Muslim guy made a deal that in the event of partition, they'll swap houses.
Oh.
Yeah. So the house in Lahore, this guy would go and just occupy, and the house in Haley Road, my family would occupy. And they were friends. They remained friends after partition. That guy managed to escape out of India, went to Pakistan because Muslims were getting killed running that direction. And my father and the immediate family managed to escape Lahore and come to Delhi. And so my uncle, they took over this Haley Road, and that became their house. And this was stocked with refrigerators, the food in the refrigerators. There were clothes. There were servants. The thing was a running house. And they left a running house in Lahore. These people left a running house in Delhi. So that home became our family home.
Very fortunate. Because my family, for instance, had to stay in refugee camps.
Yeah. So then then what happened? So I was a little kid, and I remember the interiors of this great place on Haley Road. But then some family squabbles, some problems. My father left the family, extended family, joint family, the banks, the banking stuff, and all that. He's qualified as an engineer anyway. And then we started our own post-refugee startup in New Rajendra Nagar, which was built by the whole New Rajendra Nagar, sort of low middle class, ex-Punjab people, refugees from West Punjab. Now, viewers should know, Punjab, 2/3 of Punjab was given to Pakistan. 1/3 was given to India. The 2/3 that was given to Pakistan was the most fertile. And you think Punjab that we got in India is fertile, but the amount of fertility in the Pakistan side was massive. They just don't use it as productively, but it was very, very fertile land. India ended up with 1/3. And then a couple of decades later, that got broken into Haryana, Himachal, and Punjab. So now Punjab is 1/3 of what it was. And then at that time, it was 1/3 of the bigger Punjab. So you can see how massive the place was. And when you say Punjab, it is 5 rivers. Now there's only 2. The Jhelum River was given to Pakistan by our friend Jawaharlal Nehru in the Indus Water Treaty. The Indus Water Treaty is the most stupid, ridiculous, one-sided treaty. There is no consideration.
Everything is ridiculous and one-sided. And the entire partition saga is all about.
But the thing is, at the time of partition, they had not thought of how the rivers are to be divided, and Jhelum goes through India into Pakistan. The Indus Valley Treaty said that India shall not use it. That water belongs to Pakistan, even though it goes through India. We could build a dam and take it to the south. That river alone has so much water. It's more than all the other Punjab rivers combined. Jhelum River is the mighty river. And so what happened is that a lot of our ancestral land, my father's family owned a lot of lands in those areas, and they're all gone to Pakistan, and you cannot recover anything. A lot of what we now treasure as Indus Saraswati civilization sites, which are along these rivers, those were places where my family were from. My family is from, has land, homes and all that, and ancestry, which is part of these places where the Indus sites are. But all that had to be left behind. So, you know, we had I think that the Punjabis in Delhi became this very rowdy, loud, like Texans in America, you know, over the top, aggressive kind of people, as a result of being refugees who had to be very assertive to make it, because they were the fighter Kshatriya type people who had to run. So I think they brought out a certain kind of assertiveness and aggressiveness in Delhi, and that became kind of the character of Delhi, the Punjabi Delhi.
No, but you see, it's this part of the story is only one small fragment, but this entire region and the Punjabis of the frontier, as well as this part of Punjab, had also borne the brunt of foreign invasions, Mughal invasions.
Yes.
So that survival story is in itself quite a marvel, because
so I will tell you that part.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I have a theory on why the Punjabi character is different from the Bengali character. And I have great Bengali friends. I love them. Some of the best exemplars that I follow in our tradition, whether it is Sri Prabhupada, whether it is Sri Aurobindo, were Bengalis. Subhash Chandra Bose, Bengali. So I respect them a lot. But there are two kinds. There is that kind of Bengali, very assertive. Then there's the Bengali mixed up with the British and very, kind of muddled up and very nowadays hiding behind postmodernism. That also is a Bengali. The leaders of that movement are also Bengali. So you'll find I don't want to name people, but many of them are Bengalis that we have problems with. So the question I wanted to ask is, what made the Punjabi character what it was? What made the Bengali character what it was? And I think the Punjabi character was shaped by the fact that the invaders came by land, whereas in Bengal, the invaders came by boat. The British came by boat. The land route had to go through the heartland of India, so they were buffered. The land invaders didn't really, in a very aggressive way, take over Bengal. It's the people who came by sea, the British, and these boats were very tiny. So the armies that came by land on horses could have 10,000 men, and they would be very violent. They could bring a lot of weapons with them and kill them, slaughter them. And so the defendants had to become tough, rugged, physically violent, also to hit back. So it was hard power versus hard power. The Punjab had to face hard power. It was not some cunning missionary who's trying to convert them, or some cunning British officer who's trying to give you a convoluted deal and make a babu out of you. Punjabis were not oppressed to turn into passive babu sitting in an office the way Bengalis were. Bengal had to be managed by a numerically small number of foreign invaders, literally in the hundreds, maybe low thousands, who ended up ruling an empire with hundreds of millions of people. If you look at the ratio of white blood, Englishman blood, numerically that entered India, it was very tiny compared to the blood of the people from the Middle East. How many of those came was in very large numbers. So the Punjab had to face brute force attack. Bengal faced more intellectual, emotional, manipulative kind of attack. When you are, 50 people from another continent, England, and you want to manage this whole place and take it over, you have to do it with cunning. You can't do it with brute force because you don't have the brute force in your favor. You have to do it with cunning, win them over, have them come on your side, betray their own people, divide and rule, understand their culture and their traditions and manipulate them, get scholars to become Indologists, to learn their language and translate things and all. So you have to infiltrate their mind and their emotions in order to get the better of them. So my thesis is that the Bengalis were the victim of this kind of manipulation, and a whole kind of a class of Bengali Babu, Bhadralok, emerged. Punjab was subject to brute force violence, and so Punjab's response resulted in the Sikhs. As kind of a defiance. You didn't see that kind of a Sikh-like response in Bengal because the attack was more emotional, mentally manipulative. So the response was also that kind of a thing. I think the Punjabis are a product of this very long history of invasions, and the Bengalis are a product of this long history of foreign manipulation. Foreign manipulation, which continued till the postmodernism and subaltern studies, and all those guys who were leaders in that in India are Bengalis. And so this tradition, so I say it with fondness for Bengalis. I have a lot of friends, and if I were to find people on my wavelength intellectually, whether it is the Sri Aurobindo and all his people, or Prabhupada, or so many Jiva Goswami, so many great Bengali thinkers, I'm a great fan of Subhash Chandra Bose.
But even Shama Prasad Mukherjee.
So you find on the one hand the most nationalistic, the most assertive, identity assertive people as Bengalis, but you also find many of the sellouts, they're also Bengalis. So I think this is kind of an area of research on how geography impacts history
and character.
The geography impacts the history of what has happened, and that history of what has happened shapes your identity, your sense of character, your sense of, are you a pipsqueak who will run away, or are you going to say, hey, listen, those invaders are coming, I'm going to organize a group and fight the hell out of them and kick their ass. I mean, what kind of character you have when you are facing opposition? Do you fight back or do you run away? This has also been shaped by history, and the history has been shaped by geography. This is a very interesting topic I've wanted to pursue, but I guess I won't have the time to do that. But this is a very interesting topic.
Maybe listening to you, some young scholars will take it up.
Yeah. And, I think we need regional histories of India. Like, what is the history of the Northeast? What made them who they are? What is the history of the Marathas? How, Marathas almost ended up taking over all of India. I mean, just a few mistakes went here and there, or flukes, or betrayals.
Betrayals mostly.
Betrayals mostly. So, and the history of the Cholas, such a long, great, glorious history. It goes all the way to Cambodia. We should celebrate like they celebrate in the French dynasty of some kings, or some English ones, or some they celebrate their European regional dynasties and empires, and we ought to do that. I try to do that with our History of Science and Technology series. We have 14 volumes out. We wanted to have dozens and dozens of volumes out, but we ran out of funds, so we stopped. But that was also regional. We found that, for instance, metallurgy, so Rajasthan was one of the major centers for zinc and alloys, and steel was in Bihar. And so we found that ceramics and civil engineering, water stuff, a lot of it in Gujarat, because naturally where water is short, they'll do these things. So we found that even the science and technologies has a regional bent. So I went around looking for regional sponsors. I went around saying, okay, you're from this region, you're a tycoon, you made a lot of money. I'm talking about the last 25, 30 years. I mean, I couldn't inspire people who had made a lot of money to put a small amount of it for research about the history of their own ancestry. I try to convince Marwadis, I stopped all this nonsense because it's a waste of time, that, Rajasthan, which is where you're from, there's a whole history of science, technology, astronomy, philosophical people. So the intellectual history of Rajasthan, I had all these proposals. I had proposals for people who these are days when Infosys and all these computer people are just coming out and making tons of money. I would go to them and say, why don't you, the computer people, sponsor the history of Indian mathematics? Because that's
They
related.
didn't do it?
No.
They didn't agree?
I sponsored three. We have three volumes out of our two volumes are on iron and steel. So we went to Tisco, the Tata Iron people. We went to this Mittal. We went to all these guys and said, you are the steel tycoons. Listen, we're not even talking about 1 crore. I mean, you are worth tens of thousands of crores. We're talking about just some lakhs to pay some scholars. And we will do the history of Indian steel, and you should give it to your shareholders. You should go around the world and say the reason we the Mittal people or whoever are great in steel is because we have a history of it. We are the original inventors. You should have, that should be your story, your corporate
They didn't
story.
do it? They didn't agree?
So stupid. I mean, you see, the thing is, I'm not built to be sucking up to people, whether it's some government sarkari guy, whether it is some political guy, whether it's some corporate guy, whoever it is. I mean, I'm a straight guy, straight shooter. So I'll give them a proposal in a very professional way saying, this is what we can do for you. It's, you can even pay our scholars directly. I mean, we don't need the money. We just need to pay these people, our scholars. And you can keep all the stuff. You can keep the intellectual property of it, the patent, or the copyright of it. And we just want to do this work. I wanted to do the history of all kinds. I wanted to do the history of textiles and go to the Ambanis. You're textile people. You're the world big textile people. You should sponsor the history of Indian textiles. Why can't you do that? See, all this history of Indian science and technology, if you really think about it, the corresponding industry or the closest industry to it should sponsor it. I mean, it will be such a wonderful, Diwali gift, corporate gift, annual shareholder, give it to all the shareholders, gift some book that you sponsored about your industry. It will put you in a different league as an international player who's also looking at the history of that field. I could not get.
But you couldn't. This to me is truly shocking because it's directly related to your own domain. It's not even as if you are asking them to, some tribal rights study or some esoteric community somewhere. I can't make sense of it.
So let me just tell you for the record, we have not received 1 rupee in the last 30 years, even 1 rupee for any of our volumes on history of science and technology. During the days remember when you came to Woodstock, we had that big thing with Robert Thurman. One of the persons we brought was the guy who just died.
Rodham Narasimha.
Brilliant friend.
Yeah, brilliant.
We were wonderful friends till the end. He helped me a lot. So then the other person who came was D.P. Agarwal, who was the person from Tata Institute of Fundamental Research who had set up the carbon dating lab in India. And so we made him the editor-in-chief of our History of Science Technology series. We had the former M.G.K. Menon was one of the editors. J.P. Joshi wrote one of our volumes. He was the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, J.P. Joshi, famous guy for all this Harappan stuff. And he's the one as a young man who discovered Dholavira. So we had very eminent people. We had Vibha Tripathi from Banaras Hindu University doing on iron and steel. She's a great person, famous for that. We have Balasubramaniam from IIT Kanpur, who passed away later on. He was a top scientist in the history of steel. Internationally famous. So we had very important people, Kapila Vatsyayan on the editorial board with so much prestige, with so much showing faith that we are sponsoring this from our own pocket. We would have an annual meeting and we would move it from one university to another. We would sometime do it in Simla, sometime do it in Jaipur, sometime do it in IIT here, Delhi, wherever. So we would move it to various places to popularize the idea of history of science and technology of India. At that time, nobody was bothered. So we were planting the seeds and making this a good topic and not able to get sponsors. Not able to get sponsors. We just funded it as much as we could.
This defies me, or even the government of India, not finding it worthwhile.
So first, this guy who was the education minister, who's now, he was the one, what's his name? He was the one.
Javadekar.
Very old BJP man, old BJP man. He was the education minister.
Murli Manohar Joshi ji.
Murli Manohar Joshi. So when the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government happened, suddenly got a call from the Indian consulate in New York that education ministers here want to see you. He's heard about you and wants to have a private dinner with you in New York. I said, if it's one of those political gatherings, I don't want to go because it'll be stormed with hundreds of these cronies, everybody wanting to get close to the guy. I don't want to be part of that because I've been in that. I don't like it. If it's one-on-one and if he has something serious to say, then I'll definitely go. So he said, no, it'll be only him and his daughter and you, and that's it. And the consulate, the consul general, and maybe one more person who's with him, but that's all. And we're going to spend the whole evening, and he has a lot of things to discuss with you. So I went to New York, and I must say I was very impressed by him. In person, some of these guys are very impressive. So he heard me, he saw he knew about my history of science and technology. He had heard about it. He was so impressed. He said, you shouldn't even have to worry about the funding. We'll do everything. Just write me this note. Whatever you've told me, just write it and it'll all be taken care of. And he told all these people that, okay, when he writes. So I left the meeting thinking that it's all done because I'm a transparent guy. And if somebody says this to me, I believe him, take him at face value. So I did everything at my end. I didn't hear anything back. I went to Delhi and would go and look up these people in his ministry who I was supposed to follow up with. The minister says one thing, but he hands it over to people and they don't do a darn thing. This is going on today also. So Murli Manohar Joshi turned out to be totally useless in terms of helping us, even though as a person, I like him. Every time I meet him, we're very closely aligned, but he could not use the government machinery to help us. I don't know why. The second time this happened is Rani Jethmalani, who is no more, but your friend, my friend, introduced me to Kapil Sibal when he was Minister of Science and Technology and all these kind of things.
So, he was a doer.
He was a doer. So she had the clout to call him to her house. And Ram Jethmalani there. So, it's again a small gathering. And Kapil Sibal says, come to the office tomorrow. We'll work it out. This is such an amazing project. We should take it over. And I went to the office. I took samples of our few volumes that we had and did all of that. He brought in this secretary and that fellow from the IAS and whatever. And they all heard. I had a nice coffee and nice chat. And they were so nice to me. But nothing happened after that. And I'm sick and tired of chasing these kind of people because
I can't believe because Kapil is such a doer. He may be politically disoriented, but he's a doer. When he says something, he does it. I'm really shocked.
Yeah. The third
BJP doesn't know how to exercise power. Yeah. But Kapil and the Congress ministers certainly knew how to use their office to deliver whatever they wish to.
Maybe they thought they branded me, that I'm too Hindu because I'm also talking about, while the history of science and technology was totally a secular project, totally scientific, had nothing to do with any traditions, but separately I was doing all these other things, mind sciences, Vedic influence, all of that stuff. So maybe they got scared. Maybe they showed it to some technical people for second opinion on me, and those guys gave a negative one. The third group,
yes, you were not secular enough.
In their eyes, So the third group that was very promising was the IIT. There's a pan IIT group. And MGK Menon is the head of IITs, and he was editorial board. Now imagine with somebody with so much clout, keeps referring me to, there's an IIT conference every year. Keeps referring me as, he should be the keynote speaker. And this is science and technology. IIT Press should take over, he would say. IIT Press should take over publishing this. Why Infinity Foundation have to spend so much money to do all this? IIT Press should take over. And so again, we'd go through all the motions. Now these are not government babus. These are all IIT type people. But again, very close, parochial. I'm an outsider. So it never happened. So anyway, we gave up. We said, we've done our seva. And then some people came, I don't want to name them because they're friends. Some people came to hire my people, take over the knowledge without consulting me, without getting our permission, and turn it into their own works. So 1 or 2 books got published, which basically take our work of 14 volumes and combine it, condense it into 1 volume. and they hired some of our people as sort of advisors and consultants. In a sense, make a kind of an abridged summary edition of what we had done without including us, without acknowledging us. They just took over. And some of these guys became very famous, very important because they spent,
Such as?
I won't mention, but because they spent their time as activists, giving talks, giving speeches, hanging around Delhi, becoming in the good books.
But why do you hesitate? You never hesitate to name people.
No, but this starts so many fights. So many fights it starts. But I'm at a stage where, I need to finish my work in the most efficient manner possible. And I think the fighting now, other people are taking over. My fight has moved on to the AI frontier, where other people are not fighting. So I have to teach.
No, the AI frontier, we're going to have a separate session.
Yes.
That should be a dedicated one. Now, what I want to know from you is, what made you decide after your MSc in physics from Stevens to go to the US?
I went.
And what was your experience of US of those days, the early years of you trying to establish yourself as an entrepreneur or a...
Right. No, I'll tell you, that's also an interesting story. I was 20. I landed in US after only a bachelor's degree in St. Stephen's. Usually you go after a master's degree because 3 years bachelor's degree after 11 years of schooling adds up to 14 years of college, 14 years of education. And the American who goes for, studies, master's or PhD has had 16 years because they've had 12 years of schooling, 4 years of college. So I was 2 years younger to people who are in the United States doing a PhD, but I got in because my GRE scores were very high. My recommendation letters were very high. I had some very nice essays that I wrote on physics. So I got into a PhD in physics. There's a long story how I switched from physics to computer science. That's sort of an interesting story, but on its own. And then I got into computer science. When I left, I joined the software industry.
No, but tell me, what was it like when you landed in America? What was America of those days like with regard to Indians?
So first of all, there were very few Indians. So they didn't know about India. Today, they know India through Indians because there's a large number of them after the year 2000. A large number of Indians came. I'm talking about 1970, that era. There were hardly any Indians, very, very few Indians. In a particular state, you may find 20 Indians. In the whole state, right now you'll find, lakhs of people who are of Indian origin. So you would find that their idea, the white American idea of India was very, very naive, very much through the movies, extremely ignorant. And so it was good and bad. It was, I found that it was bad in the sense there were stereotypes, but it was also good in the sense that if I have a gift of the gab, if I can understand them and talk to them in a way that they relate to, I can also sell them. I can also convince them. I developed a lot of convincing skills in dealing with Americans, and I still am able to do that. I did it in the Deep South. I lived in North Carolina. That's the Deep South. So I learned the Deep South. All the rednecks, I learned how to be friends with them. I had a lot of friends who were deep rednecks, which means you would think of them as white supremacists. I got to know these people. I got to pick up their accent. I had a Southern drawl in those days. So I learned how to kind of mingle in and, understand them. Then I went to New York, totally different state, totally different. I lived in New York, Connecticut. Then I moved to Michigan, which is Midwest. Then I moved to California. I lived there for 20 years in Southern California, completely different culture. So I've moved around this country more than most Americans have. I have more experience as an American than most people born and raised in this country, the white Americans, because they haven't had that much experience. I have been an employee. I have been an employer. I have been a partner. I have managed thousands of white people working under me. I have competed against, the American establishment of industry and companies. So I have done all kinds of things for an immigrant. It's very unusual for that generation. But now there's, of course, a large number of Indians who are all over the place and doing very well. But many of them are uprooted from their heritage. So I was able to do that without compromising ever my heritage, ever. I mean, when I owned businesses, if I wanted my kirtan playing on the intercom in my building, I didn't care what they'll think. I put the intercom. If I wanted to, that okay, on this day we're going to serve everybody idlis, serve idlis. I'm talking about 80s. I'm talking about when these things were not done. I'm talking about being one of the first corporate board members and executives in a Fortune 20 company, which was ITT, that was non-white. There were no Indians in those days. Now it's of course common that Indians are CEOs and all of that, but in the 70s and 80s it was not the case. So there was a certain spirit of pioneering, which I guess I inherited from my upbringing. That I am this courageous guy. I am not second to anybody, and I'll argue. I'll present myself, and who the hell are they to hold me back? I never let anybody, kind of discriminate against me in matters that were business related or professional related. And I never filed myself. This is very interesting. When I became a management consultant to AT&T, this is different from ITT. At a very top level, I was doing all kind of major projects to get them into what are now the important new technologies. But in those days, things like internet and information services, transaction services were very new. So I was the consultant helping them do all that. Throughout all that, I never took advantage of classifying myself as a minority. In fact, the HR department of AT&T called me and said, you just have to fill out one form, and then you'll be classified as a minority. You'll get some privileges when we are giving out contracts. I said, but I'm doing so well on open competition. I'm doing so well on open competition. I don't need all this tag of being a minority and all that. A lot of Indians are, by the way. A lot of Indians have been setting up their success based on classifying themselves as a minority and getting some quota and all that stuff. I never believed in that. I have never taken advantage of any country anywhere based on my identity or heritage or background. It's entirely
that's the Punjabi Kshatriya blood in you. I remember my father refused to take any property that they were giving to refugees. वो दे रहे थे उन दिनों refugee को plot New Rajinder Nagar में, Nizamuddin में. And my father refused, saying मैं refugee बन के अपने देश में नहीं जीऊँगा. And he just refused to take any compensation. But also because he had no head for money and he had no head for property. And but for my mother, we would probably be still in one room or two room rented accommodation. But this, Anak, which is, I'm not going to be putting myself in a condition of a receiver or a special quota wala. That's very much a Kshatriya trait. So when did this patriotic fervor take the form of Infinity Foundation? Why did you decide to?
So before Infinity, I went through 4 or 5 careers in the tech industry. Just real quick. First was a software guy in mainframes, the giant computers in those days. Some history was created. I should mention that. This was in Detroit. There was one of the largest installations in Detroit was an IBM installation. They were a competitor to us. We were IBM's competitor in selling mainframes, and their computers were being used by the city administration, the municipality. The municipality of Detroit, called City of Detroit, was one of IBM's largest installations. And here we are, headquartered in Detroit as a competitor of IBM. We are the second largest taxpayer of the city, and they are not using our computers. So imagine our chairman would go to the mayor every year and say, why don't you throw out the IBM and put our stuff? Instead, we are right in your town creating jobs and giving you taxes. And why are you giving the money, the business to IBM? And every year he would say, I'll buy all your hardware, provided you can convert the software from IBM to your system. And converting the software was very labor intensive. It was going to take hundreds of man years. And the cost of doing it was so huge, nobody wanted to undertake that bigger project. So it was not going anywhere. There was this bar across the headquarters of my company, the company I worked in. There was a bar. So being young, single, nothing to do, every day after work, I'd just finish the work and just head across the street to this bar. And this bar is where people would be playing pool, and some people would be ping ponging and, having drinks and maybe having dinner. And this is the bar where there were, I must say, to the credit of the American workplace, people kind of get out of their hierarchy and their prestige and their posts and their power the moment they're out of the office. So you meet in somebody's home, you meet for a barbecue, you meet for a picnic, you meet in a bar, it's all relaxed. So in this bar, you could talk to anybody. And I'm this young fellow from India on student visa at the time, work permit. And I'm full of myself. I'm just telling people all kind of things. So I would go to these top guys and say, that city of Detroit conversion of software, let's get programmers from India and it'll cost you very little.
Oh.
And these guys would say, oh, okay, oh, program for India, okay. You think about it. It was considered a weird thing. It was considered a weird thing. Now there was one fellow, a senior guy to me. He was not that necessarily that imaginative, but he had been there longer. So one day out of the blue, I get a call that the chairman's office is a meeting. They want you. I said, "Arey bhai, maybe I'm in trouble. Kya kar diya?" So I didn't know if I'm in trouble. Maybe I said something wrong, but I went there. And they said, regarding this idea of you're doing this, that we can do this with people from India, tell us more, let's discuss. We are in conversation with this big company called Tata's. So our company got into consultation with Tata's. TCS was not even $100 million company, not even $100 million company. And Kohli, who just passed away, was the visionary, the big visionary who wanted to, I'm talking about in the 70s. He wanted to, he had these ideas that, Indians could do all this work, software work. So the two companies worked together. A project was created called City of Detroit Conversion Project, where several dozen people from Tata's were brought in to Detroit, and they would live there until the project was done. Now, software projects are notoriously, they cost overrun, they take longer than they planned, nothing happens on time and schedule, they're notorious. I made sure that we delivered on time, within budget. So all these TCS people were single men, and they had nothing else to do but work. And there was not a single Indian restaurant in Detroit or Michigan in those days. The only Indian restaurant was in Canada, across the border. You go into Windsor. Windsor is a town across the border in Canada. And Windsor had some third-rate Indian restaurant there. So there would be two outings for these for the team from TCS, and we make them work. Every time, all of the time was hard work. One was every weekend, we would drive them to Windsor and have Indian lunch. Real good, nice Indian feast. And another outing was we would take them to a shopping mall. And they love shopping malls, because they're not shopping malls in India until recently. So this is a very big hit. And so in exchange for these two rewards and gifts, if you will, very innocent, these guys would work their ass off. They would really, very brilliant people. I tell you, I've never seen a team of such brilliant software guys. So when the project was successful, this was like instant fame. India got smart people. My God. So then there was a project from city of Miami. That was one of the second projects. Then what happened is this SWIFT network in Europe. SWIFT is Society for Worldwide Inter-Funds Transfer, something to that effect. It's a society created in those days for banks to clear checks with each other. So if Madhu Kishwar has a check on bank of some Barclays Bank in England, and you happen to be going to Spain and you want to deposit it or cash a check in Spain where there's no Barclays. So this SWIFT network is the way that these banks would transfer funds from each other. That is how the SWIFT, in this wiring and all that started with SWIFT. So SWIFT wanted a system, a network developed, a huge mainframe with mini computers. They wanted to give a contract. And this is a very prestigious contract, international contract. Our company applied. and the reason we were able to win is because we bid Indian programmers at a that was at a much lower cost. We bid that the software job would be done with Indian programmers, and no other competitor had that kind of advantage. So we were the best proposal, and we won the contract. So the Swift network became the second or third one of the first few huge success stories for India's outsourcing. So city of Detroit, city of Miami, Swift network, a few very strategic contracts like that happened in rapid succession. I was part of these. And this built the credibility of, Indian programmers are good, we can bring them. So our company became the first computer company to create a whole division where we would bring in Indian programmers and market them as part of the sales. The salesman could quote, you sell hardware, you also need some programmers, we'll supply you those programmers. Until the year 2000, when Indian programmers got a jump because of Y2K, which is another thing that happened in the late 90s. Until then, we were the main people in the US bringing programmers in. So I have a history of that also. I remember all that. That is relevant to today because I was telling this to Infosys people before Infosys was created. I was on the client side bringing Indian programmers. Creating this kind of credibility and using TCS, which is a very tiny company in those days. So I have that to bring into my contemporary. When I talk about contemporary technology and all that, they say, who the hell are you? You should be talking about some, religious stuff. They don't understand I have this background. And also people don't understand that when I was doing my graduate work in computer science, my specialty was artificial intelligence. But
at that time,
in that artificial intelligence in those days, we were trying to make programs that could play chess, and it was very difficult to beat a chess grandmaster. Programs were not that good. It's much later in the 90s that computer programs could beat chess grandmasters. Of course, today no chess grandmaster can match an ordinary AI program. AI programs are way ahead, but that was not the case at that time. The ideas existed, but what we didn't have are certain things, like we didn't have the hardware power like we have today, because AI requires so much hardware power. Second, we didn't have big data. We didn't have so much data to learn from. And the approach to AI was different. The approach to AI was that we will replicate how the human being solves a problem. We will replicate that in the software. So that way the software can only be as smart as the person. You cannot outsmart the person because you're replicating what he does. Now AI we can discuss it at some point in time, but AI is not replicating how humans work. AI is not replicating how humans work. AI can figure out how you are solving a problem, even though you may be unconsciously doing it. Some parts of that approach may be unconscious. You don't know how to explain it to somebody, but AI, through its observation and experimentation and trial and error, through lots and lots of cases, can figure out how humans are doing things which even humans are not able to explain. So this is a new kind of AI. That AI in those days was a very rudimentary AI. So I have background in all of that. I saw the mainframe industry being attacked by the mini computer industry. Then the mini computer industry became big. Then the mini computer industry got attacked by the desktop industry, these laptops and all these kind of things, desktop industry, then the desktop industry to the laptop industry, then the laptop industry to the handheld industry. And now these phones going further into watches, going further into augmented reality, virtual reality goggles, going even further into implants. So I have seen the journey of how every 5 years, the whole technology is revolutionized. And I was part of, staying ahead. So when the technology would shift, I would change jobs. I would go somewhere else where they were doing cutting edge things. I was into all this. And had I stayed in the technology, I would be certainly up there with all these people who are doing these amazing things in the new technology. I would be there with them. But
so what made you quit that? Because you could have been among the pioneers of new technologies.
Yes.
So what happened?
I was a pioneer of new technologies, but I exit before the valuations went sky high. You know, the today software company gets 50 times annual earnings, 100 times annual earnings, 200 times annual earnings. These are the way software companies are valued. In those days, when we were trying to sell a small software house, it was difficult to convince people that it was worth more than 3 or 4 times earnings, because the idea that software is an asset wasn't there. Software is something that programmers do, and these programmers leave at night. And basically, a software house has got nothing, no assets, it's just programmers who can be doing work for you. But the fact that the software is an asset, it's a package, and you can, once you build it, you can download it millions of times, is a relatively new thing. Because
Do you regret having quit that domain a bit too early?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I see. There are two levels when I reflect on it. One is when I explain to you why I did it. It was not for any public success. It was my swadharma. It was an inner calling. It is like, this is what I ought to do as my swadharma, is giving back. So that motivation and that driving force has never changed. And as far as that is concerned, I'm fulfilling my dharma, whether the rest of the people of India like it or not, whether they're good for it or not, I don't care. I'm doing my swadharma. So that part, that is, let's say level A, is my swadharma, and I'm very happy doing it. Level B comes later. Later on, I start saying, okay, you know, contrary to my guru's advice, my guru in the 90s had told me, don't do anything because of other people. They're not going to be there for you. And if you're doing it for their sake, you'll just be disappointed. They will not be up to your standard. They'll turn out to be, not the right kind of people. So don't worry about other people. You do just what you want to do for yourself. So that part was okay. But later I got into this business of, we ought to help. We ought to bring in other people. We ought to create an organization. We ought to take on the opponents because they're so organized. They have such a lot of firepower. We ought to become an institution. When I started doing all of that is when I started getting disappointed with our people, whether it is
So my question is a little before that.
Okay.
Since you quit just at the point when this IT and artificial intelligence, all this was taking off, had you stayed a little longer, you could have gotten billions.
I would, yes.
Which could have then you wouldn't have needed Tata money, you wouldn't have needed Ambani's or Infosys telling them, please fund this, fund that, because you put all your money in it, and there's a limit to, because you quit so early. Another maybe 10 years.
No, 5 years. 5 years.
Yeah, you could have been a billionaire.
Because I was thinking of quitting in the early 90s, and 94 is when I created Infinity Foundation and I started the whole process. And when I quit, I didn't maximize the money I could make. I had Ernst & Young. They're doing our annual audits, and they were our people. They did all the work all over in 20 countries where I was doing. Ernst & Young or their affiliates would do the work.
Louder.
Ernst & Young built a prospectus. They said, if you want to exit, just one of my subsidiaries was worth many, fairly substantial amount of valuation. So I still have a copy of that prospectus. They wanted to go around marketing, getting a buyer and all that. I had a different vision. My whole calling was that, one should make enough money, but not more than enough. When I was a young man going to America, the dream was that I'll make enough so I don't have to keep working all my life. I'll become financially independent, and then I'll pursue my philosophy. I'll pursue my quest. I always had that. I always felt that the real reason, the real purpose and calling I have is intellectual, spiritual. It's at a higher level. But all this business of running around and working and getting successful is necessary, because otherwise I'll work all my life for other people. Like, I saw my dad working in this company, that company, and that's a different kind of rat race. So in order for a educated class family, a middle class person, very honest, very, kind of high integrity background, in order for such a person to become financially self-sufficient, is not easy. It's only now that anybody gets into business and all that. In those days, the business class, Marwadis and a few others, were business class. And then we were service class, professional service. Our background would be the uncle, aunt, cousins, whatever, would either be in the IAS, they would become chartered accountants, they would become doctors, they would become engineers, these kind of things, but not like, okay, start your own business. That was considered like, okay, if you are no good, if you are if you're a bad student, they either threaten, they'll send you to the army में भेज देंगे, or this what is that thing called merchant navy में भेज देंगे, नालायक है, merchant navy में भेज देंगे. So all my नालायक second third cousins went there. Yeah, they would you know, they would say कि अच्छा तेरे को दुकान खोल देंगे, तेरे को कुछ काम वाम तो आता नहीं है. So the idea of being a venture, of being an entrepreneur, was sort of like you are reject. If you are a smart guy, then you should be in one of these professions. So actually, that's the era I was in. That's the generation of Punjabi.
No, but imagine if 5 years later you had made a few $1 billion and put it into Infinity Foundation.
It would have
your
been great.
work would have taken wings at a different plane altogether.
And there are times I wish that, but you know, I can't reverse that and change it. When I did it, it is because I had a spiritual awakening and an experience which made it very clear that, you know, chasing more money is a bad idea for me, because I have something very big to discover. I'm going to discover it for myself. That is my calling. I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go deep into my meditation. I'm going to go deep into my sadhanas. I'll read a lot. I discover a lot. I'll get involved in debates and exchanges with other learned people, and try to be a scholar, my own scholar, for myself, not because I'm building a career or something, but for myself. So that journey has still been there. I've never had second thoughts about it. I've never doubted the
Who was your guru?
Okay, my guru has no name, who left the body in the early 2000s, so soon after 2000, was in Bombay, and the guru's name was Bhagwan. That is not the actual name, but everybody said Bhagwan. And elderly person in the 70s at that time, Advait Guru, very much in the tradition of Raman Maharshi, very much in the tradition of, you know, live in Vyavhar in an Advait sense, seeing every person playing their role. This is Bhagwan playing the role. This is Bhagwan playing the role. And I am also the same, playing the role. So with detachment, with trying to decenter the ego as much as possible, with detachment, live your life to work out your prarabdha and then be free. So this idea that the karmic prarabdha is pushing me, driving me, giving me situations, but I shouldn't create new karma. I should just perform this without the attachment. Let the phal and the effects of the karma play out, and I'll become more and more free. So that's sort of a philosophy in action. And the method was satsang. So satsangs were held. The main satsang was with the guru and everybody who could fit into this room in Mumbai. And twice a year they would go, the whole thing would move to Haridwar. So it would move to Haridwar so that more people could join. But the guru, in the satsang, the guru would give a little talk on some idea for that day. And then a lot of people could ask questions. And whatever question you asked was your question in your situation, and the guru would answer it. And the guru said that just like Arjun created his Gita by questioning his guru, Krishna, he creates the Gita by constantly questioning, interrogating, you know, grilling his guru, asking this, asking that, because it applies to his context, his life. That Kurukshetra is Krishna's context. So, Arjun's context. So just as Arjun creates the Gita, this Bhagavad Gita is Arjun's Gita. It is Gita for Arjun by Arjun. So my guru would say, you, Rajiv, should create, you should ask me the questions, and that will be your Gita. You should ask me questions about your life, about your family, about your work, about this thing, that thing. You should ask me questions. That is your Kurukshetra. So your Kurukshetra.
That's very unusual approach.
Yeah. So you should Figure out how to live your life, what choices to make, what choices not to make. The way Krishna, the way Arjuna is asking, do I do this? If I do this happens. These are my doubts. So there is philosophy, there is action, there is bhakti for the guru. There's all of that mixed in. So this was a process of each person seeking their calling, their swadharma, by interrogating the guru. And so then this would be, these Q&As would be written down. The guru didn't want any machine typing, mass producing, books written. None of that was allowed. Websites. There were some very wealthy people who were icons. I mean, from movie stars in Bombay to the largest media house, their owners, they were all into with the guru. But the guru wanted anonymity. A guru wanted humility. No use of money. Nobody with money will throw around and become more important in this. Guru would say, if you've come to Haridwar to attend this camp, you're sleeping. Where is your driver sleeping? Guru asked, "Aapka driver kahan so raha hai? Usko wahan kyun sula diya?" On the one hand, you are saying everybody is Bhagwan's form. So you are Bhagwan's form and he's Bhagwan's form. So why are you not looking after him? So basically, Guru would send everybody ke jaake dekho bahar jo dhoop mein, garmi mein line lagi hai karon ki, drivers wahan baithe hain, they're sleeping in there. Why are they sleeping there? So we were taught to. So once I remember, I took my driver from Delhi. And we got a room in this dharamsala, very simple type of place where we would wash our own thalis, cook, share, cutting the vegetables. Phenomenal, right on the Ganga, we would do all that. And a room where my driver had one bed, I had another bed. We were like roommates. And so, you build a different relationship with your fellow human being. And so this was full of rethinking life.
How many years did you spend with?
So I would say from 94 till the guru left the body, which was around 2002.
How did you come across this very unusual?
So this guru, some people in the family, my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, they knew this guru. Some of their family people had gone very deep into this movement. So they told me there's this guru who's happened to be visiting Delhi once, and you should meet this guru. So I said, what does this guru say? So tell me. So they told me what this guru is saying. So my attitude was very cynical. I said, I already know those things. That's written standard in Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad. I'm a busy guy. I've come here for running around and doing my work. And I know many such gurus. So they went and told this to the guru. And the guru said to them, one day he will become one of the most important persons following me. But today he's not ready, so don't push him. This is what the guru told them. So they came and told me. They said, one day you'll be back and you'll not be talking like this. But you know how a busy guy who has a lot of theoretical knowledge of the Gyan and all that, doing well, full of his ego. I mean, I don't want to listen. So I didn't want to listen to these relatives who I don't think they were that well informed. And I felt I knew more already. So who's this guru trying to teach me? That was my attitude. It was a very cynical attitude in hindsight. But then what happened is my businesses led me to some horrible moments where I felt that some of the people involved, I had businesses in Eastern European countries. There was a lot of mafia type people, a lot of ex-KGB type people trying to do all kind of stuff. We were under threat. Some of my people were under threat of being kidnapped. We were under serious issues. And so I felt that we made all this money. And, now we are becoming so big that we're a target. In those days, I'm talking about early mid-90s, it was not normal for American or Western countries to go to Eastern Europe. Even in Korea, we were a novelty as an American company. Mexico, so a lot of these places, we were a pioneer as a small telecom company messing around in their country with some innovative ideas, which later turned out to be very explosive ideas. But it was ahead of its time. These kind of things were ahead of their time. So I had a whole lot of business challenges and disillusionments. I also had problems with, in certain countries, my own employees, my own general manager cheating. Starting, like in one country, the general manager started a business with his wife's name, took all our software, took a whole lot of our stuff, and created a competitor that, kind of taking our assets and building a competing enterprise under his wife. So there were all kinds of problems to solve. Plus, I was this working like crazy 7 days a week, running from country to country, hopping countries. I would take an overnight flight from morning when they would pick me up, working breakfast all the way to a working dinner, not a time to sleep, not a time to rest, and then go jump to the next country and the next country. So there were a lot of things coming together. Also, I did not have a mature management that could take over all this. They were all young entrepreneurs, young scientific, nerdy kind of techie people that I hired. So this was getting out of hand. The amount of money being made was so huge. It was my first contract was with AT&T, and they regretted giving me an exclusive contract, because the amount of royalty they owed me royalty. It was so huge. They never thought that this percentage will end up being so much money. They thought it was a chota mota business. So even they were surprised. So I then went to various telecom carriers, marketed my stuff and on royalty basis. So this became more money than I thought I needed to retire, because I had goals that if I make X money, I can live fine. I'll retire and I'll pursue my hobbies, my interests, my intellectual interests. So now I was able to do that. So there's a very interesting story here. The person, an HR firm, a man called Rich Lame, L-A-M-M-E, a young man and his wife, he was a HR guy, headhunter, recruiter, and he's the one who recruited me into ITT many years ago, many years earlier. And he and I became friends. We became family friends. And so in those days, he had asked me, what's your goal in life? You want to be, okay, so we're going to hire you as this senior guy. What's your goal in life? What's your ultimate goal? What's your calling? What's in your heart? You know, when you are being recruited, they also ask you these kind of questions. So I had told him that my ultimate goal is not to pursue a materialistic success. This is just a means to an end. When I've reached X amount of net worth, I'm going to quit all this and I'm going to start my own stuff. And a lot of people would hear me and think that this guy never going to quit because he's so successful. Why would he quit? And he's just talking like that. But I did quit. I was true to that. So what happened is the following. There was a flight. I was going on a flight from Newark to some East European country. And when I reached Newark airport, they said airport is closed because of a blizzard, huge blizzard. And so you got to wait. We don't know if it's 2 hours or 8 hours. You got to wait. So the only airport hotel in those days was the Marriott. Now there's many hotels in Newark airport, but I'm talking about that time when the Marriott, which is right in the middle, was the only airport hotel. So everybody landed up at the Marriott because of the blizzard. So I ended up at the Marriott. Flights are canceled. So I'm sitting there in the hall on the floor on my briefcase because there's no chairs. The restaurants are all full. Rooms are all gone. So many people, nowhere to go. So they're sitting in the main lobby of this Marriott hotel. So I'm also one of them. So I'm sitting, they're all clustered together. You know, like you'd think these things won't happen in America, that probably this is the railway station in some town in India. But that railway station look of people huddled up together with suitcases and all was the state of affairs in this Marriott hotel. So I was sitting there. And then there's this young man sitting next to me, or some middle-aged guy sitting next to me. And he's going and looking at me, white guy, American guy, nice, pleasant face, looking at me like that. And I didn't recognize him, but he recognized me. So he said, you are so and so? I said, yeah. And then he told me he's that same fellow who was the headhunter who had hired me over a decade back and knew we got to know each other. Now we had gotten out of touch. And we just bumped into each other as a matter of coincidence. So he's asking me, what's your life? What's going on? What have you been up to? He's telling me, he's giving me his background. We're catching up with each other. So he's the one who tells me, he says, Rajiv, you promised me long before you achieve this much financial success, you reached your goal. You should be retired by now. Why are you worried? You're telling me you're worried. You got to fly here. You got to have that meeting. You got to solve that problem in your business and that problem. Why do you have to solve anything? You should just give up because you've achieved your goal. He told me that because whatever figure I told him, I need X million and I'll be happy and I'll retire. I had gone manyfold that. And so he was pointing out to me, you should be retired. So actually that was an idea I got that, I'm going through all this. Why don't I quit? Then when I went back to my office after another trip, this is when Deepak Chopra was very new. This is like, I'm talking about early 90s when he's not a big deal. But I felt that Deepak Chopra had become very big, and he and I went to the same school. So but I didn't know him in school.
Which school? Modern school?
No, St. Columbus.
St. Columbus.
And
St. Columbus, St. Stephen's, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason I knew this is that his tie in his spa, in his treatment center, where they have his family photographs, his tie as a boy, when they showed his family photograph, was my school tie. So I figured he must be my schoolmate. So anyway, what happened is my office people felt that I needed a vacation very badly because I was walking around, I'd probably have a heart attack, and they were wondering, I haven't even had one yet, but I was due for a heart attack. Everybody thought I'll either get kidnapped by the Russian mafia or I'll die of a heart attack. And, I'm a careless guy running around, not looking after my family, but making tons of money. So this business wanting to get some help medically or relax a little bit so I won't have a psychological breakdown. This was being discussed by my office people, that this guy he's not going to take a holiday. So, we'll just give him a holiday that he has to take. So when I went back to my work from one of these trips, there was this gift envelope for me. All these people in the office pitched in the money to give me the very luxurious treatment in the Chopra Center, which had just started. So I went to the Chopra Center for 2 weeks. Before it was officially opened, it was like pre-opening. A few people were allowed, so they allowed me. And when I went, there were only 10 people. The week before, George Harrison was there, because in the guest book, there's a guest book, you go and you fill out your guest and your comments. And on the previous page was George Harrison, all these kind of guys had stopped by. Gloria Estefan was, so a lot of these kind of Hollywood famous people, designers, these kind of people were in my batch of 10 and previous batches. So it was a very select group. And at that point, he charged a lot of money to get into this, and my employees paid it. I was so happy. So that's when I did my panchakarma, I did my all kind of stuff going on. I'm relaxing. And they're initiating people for meditation. His daughter, who's now become a big shot, was a student in those days, and he would ask her to initiate people. So I was actually initiated by his daughter. But then when they initiated me, I said, this is the same thing that I'm doing. It's called transcendental meditation. Maharishi taught me this. So this is the same thing. Later,
you learned TM from Maharishi himself?
Yes. So I learned TM, and TM I still follow. It's an amazing thing. It has helped me transform a lot. My guru gave me the next level on top of it. So I've had many gurus who teach me different things. But what Deepak Chopra was teaching through his daughter was TM, but he gave it his own name. Later on, I realized that he was trained by Maharishi. He was a physician, a cardiologist in Maharishi's organization. That's where he learned all this stuff about Ayurveda. And later on, he went on his own. I've even called him for that he ought to be more grateful to his guru, because he should acknowledge that Maharishi is the one where he got it from. But he was teaching something with his own spin, very similar. So I raised this in the group. I said, but what you're teaching, the mantra is different. That Bij mantra is different. But my Bij mantra with the Maharishi is so good. I mean, I don't even make an effort. It's always there. It just shows up. And so he was very good about it. He said, okay, in that case, you stick to the Maharishi system, because if it works for you, we don't want to override it. So he was nice. So we hit it off very nicely. The way I got to see him, because he wasn't supposed to show up, it was his people conducting all these classes and his daughter. The way I got to see him is there was his photograph, family photograph with his parents, and he was wearing the tie of my school. So whenever I would ask, I want to see Deepak, oh, he's busy, he's gone here, there, he's not here, whatever. So on a piece of paper, I just wrote down Rajiv Malhotra, a St. Columbus School, Delhi, alumni. And I sent it. And within like 10 seconds, he walked in to say hello to me.
Oh.
So he says, oh, hello. So what batch were you? So we started into this brother Morrow and this guy and that guy, all those Irish Christian brothers who were there. So we had all this nostalgia about school life. That's how we got to know each other. And I must say, even though I may disagree with him and we haven't stayed in touch, I consider him a decent fellow and a good friend. In this illness I just had, in this surgery I just had, among the people I consulted was Deepak Chopra. I contacted him and said, Deepak, I need, who would be a good Ayurvedic person in the United States that would help me supplement. And he gave me the name of some particular, he said, this is the best Ayurvedic doctor I'm going to introduce you to. He called and that guy called me. And so when I need him, I mean, or when I want to have a discussion with him on something, he's there. He's a smart guy. So he had a role in my transformation. So one is this HR guy, this headhunter who pointed out to me. But what Deepak did is, as a result of the 2 weeks, I was so unwound, so relaxed, so, my God, because they made a rule that when you come in, you check in your phone, you don't get faxes, you're not going to get phone calls unless it's life-threatening situation and some family member calls. We're not going to give you your messages. You got to isolate yourself from the outside world. Otherwise, you're not getting any benefit. So that deep rest which I got, and all this meditation and all this panch karma and all, made I had tremendous experiences there, because that was on the waterfront in La Jolla, right on the waterfront beach. It was right there, and this lying down and having this Sirodhara and all, you feel sometimes you get a whole different level of insight. I started getting deep insights. But then it was the journey back home from San Diego to Newark, long flight, during which things started crystallizing. I started saying, why am I going next week to Hungary, week after Poland, and then I'm going to Spain? Why do I need it? And this kind of boredom, letting go of success, that what I'm now discovering, what I'm now experiencing is so much more valuable. Why do I want to keep chasing all this nonsense, working so hard, fighting battles with all these nasty people, and in order to make all this money? Why do you need to do all that? So this also started happening to me. And then the final thing that did it was I went to Bombay to meet my guru. I went to Bombay.
But that time he was not your guru yet.
No, that was not my guru. So I went to Bombay. And I told all my relatives that I have all these traumas and issues and complexities and, quandaries and all that, and I want to straighten it out. So I went to my guru, and first of all, the guru would very rarely meet one-on-one because there's so much demand. They would always meet 20 people at the same time, But I was given this privilege to meet one-on-one in a very tiny, almost like a cave, looking enough capacity for just 2-3
Louder.
people. Enough capacity for just 2-3 people to sit. So I was the only person with the guru. I was sitting there. And that is when I had an experience of a kind of a universal consciousness, a kind of without body, without borders, without sense of location, a kind of a consciousness that is not easy to describe. And it was not, I lost a sense of time. That is the conversation, short conversation I had, which I don't know led to some indeterminate amount of time of this experience. All I know is that I was then in the car with this host who was driving me around, very wonderful people in Mumbai who looked after me during all those years. So this host was driving me. Suddenly, I was in the car. Now, how I got from the guru's room, I don't even have a recollection. But I was in the car, and this gentleman tells me, he says, "You've clearly had a profound experience. And rather than talking to you, asking you for details, because then you'll get out of it, I'll leave you alone and you just enjoy and keep enjoying this as long as you can, because ultimately you'll get out of it. But enjoy whatever is happening. I don't know, but nobody will bother you." So it's just so nice of him. Because usually if you're the host, you want to say, okay, kya hua, what happened, kya. So he respected the fact that I need my own privacy. I need to be left alone to feel this moment. So I was there in his house for a few days in this kind of a state of, not wanting, I mean, they would give me food, I'd eat it. But I was into bliss, in anand, into a state of, I don't even need anything. I mean, I'm just okay. And not limited by the sense of Rajiv identity. So it's a very interesting experience, which I think an enlightened master can give to a person.
हाँ,
And
सिद्धि है जिसके पास. I'm
yeah,
told that only those who have real सिद्धि, उनकी presence में
yeah,
ये transformative experience होता.
yeah. But I'll tell
So
you
you
something.
went through this big blessing.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something. It's not like I came back and said, okay, I'm quitting everything and all that. I had to negotiate with the guru, which went on for several months. Because
Oh,
Guru said, I would call, I would write letters, they would give replies, I would go see. Guru said, why do you want to leave? Why you want to leave? Who do you think you are solving the world problem? I would say, ye karna hai, yahan bias hai, I have to fight this bias, this is my dharma, I have to learn this. The Guru would say, again, your ego coming in the way. Who's Rajiv to solve all these problems? These are all very big things. The Guru actually testing me, checking me, pushing me to go deeper. And Guru didn't like this thought that I'm going to abandon the family, because a lot of people would leave and they would no longer be responsible to the family. And the Guru was very much into Vyavarik. You have to satisfy your Vyavarik prarabdh and do your Vyavarik karma. And the Guru told me point blank, you chose to have a family. You made a family. That is a karma you've done. Now you have to look after the family. My kids were very young, 13 and 10 at the time. And my wife's a homemaker, doesn't work. So what will happen to them? So I said, I would argue back. I would say, that does it mean that because I've got a family that I'm never able to go beyond the family? And the Guru would say that sannyas doesn't mean physically running away. Sannyas means you give up certain things and you pursue other things, but you could be doing it while being in the family. So I said, okay, but then I want to give up my business because it occupies me too much. It just takes too much time. So final settlement we made was that I will set aside enough money in trusts that are nothing to do with me, owned by these trusts with the banks and all that, and to look after family, to look after my wife, to look after my kids, that will give an income equal to their current standard of living. So they're not going to have to downsize. They're not going to have to go to a smaller place. They're not going to, in other words, nothing will touch their quality of life. So if I were to keep working, this is the quality of life they have. When I'm no longer working, I'm giving them that same quality of life. And if I can do that and set aside all of that, which is not going to be controlled by me, I can never change my mind on it, then have I satisfied my karma. And the Guru reluctantly, not enthusiastically, reluctantly said, okay, as long as you do that, then it's okay for you to move on. My family was all very confused. My kids had to face, friends want to know, what do your dad do? So what do we tell him? Dad, you sit and meditate all the day, and you are writing this book, or you're writing something. What do you do? A while back, they would say that he owns all these companies and he's a big shot and he's doing this and that. Uh, and my kids went to a very good, prestigious private school in Princeton, very well known. And so the kids who are there are kids of, important families also in Princeton. Some are from, the big scholars, thinkers, intellectuals. Some are big political people, famous people. Some are movie stars. So they send their kids to this kind of school. And so when they sit in class and they talk about family, and all those people have great things to say, somebody's mom is president here, somebody's dad is so and so there, you know, and when it's the turn of my kids, they don't know what the hell to say. So it was a very, it was, I was an embarrassment. Madhu, you have to realize 99% of the people who are in this journey today that you and me are in, they are not from this background. They did not give up on this. They did not achieve it to be able to give it up.
Yeah.
They are not from this background where they understood modern society, high class, money, technology, self-made people, all these people, you know. Today, my friends in Princeton, they are still in the same lifestyle like I was, and they are worth huge amount of money. At that time, I was way ahead of everybody, but they are very rich, big shots. But you know, for them, the calling hasn't come. That calling hasn't come. I mean, they still see me as sort of like, you know, a poor guy who's not enjoying life, you know. You know, we're having fun. We're going to go on this private jet, and we're going to fly to Greece, and we're going to rent this island. And he's not coming. He's a boring guy. That's how they feel me. So I left a certain life, which 99% of the people in India are dying to get. This is their dream. This is their fantasy. This is what a fraction of that, if they got, they'll be very happy. I already had it and left it. So that's why I don't like it when people compare and say, oh, you know, you are like a so-and-so, wo bhi aise hi baatein karta hai. I mean, the point is they have not, firstly, those guys who are into all this YouTube and here and there video and all that, firstly, they haven't achieved that much success to be able to give it up and to have that experience. I have the experience. This business of achieving success and then giving it up on my own terms gives me the confidence that when I go to the corporate people, I don't care how billionaire they are. I can deal with them because I've dealt with these people. I mean, there's the same mind, is the same mind that I used to be their boss. In fact, some of the people who interned for me, some of the people who were employees for me are worth a huge amount of money now. But of course, their yardstick is money. So as far as they're concerned, I dropped out, and that's too bad. But you know, they look at it as money. So I would say that the final negotiation with my guru to keep the family secure, and then take whatever I wanted to put it into the foundation. So I did three groups, three parts. One is the largest part, look after the family so that they are not bothered they're not affected. The second was an endowment for the foundation so that it can go on from the profits. And the third was my retirement plan. Now the retirement plan, which is like my pension, if you will, is written up as a trust where when I die, it goes to the foundation. It doesn't go to my family because they're already taken care of. They already got their stuff. What is my retirement plan after I die goes to the foundation. So now my problem is the foundation has a good deal of, or it has a good endowment right now. And its size will double or it'll increase huge by the time when I leave. But who's going to be their person caretaker? Who's the manager of it? Who's in charge? Who's the president of it? I need to find those people. That's my unfinished business. I cannot leave at this stage. It will be chaos. I have to finish my work, you know, and put a whole lot of this stuff in a very solid way and make courses out of it and make sure there are enough people who understand my work. And then I need to train people to take over the foundation, which is an institution with a lot of, which has a good, you know, solid amount of endowment, and it has intellectual property, and it has all these people. And therefore this institution needs to have continuity. It should not fall apart when I'm gone. So that's the reason I decided I need more time and I need an extension. And therefore I better go through the surgery. So that's how the whole thing is.
And well, you've come out of it strong, and it's good to see you looking so relaxed. I mean, you've talked 2 hours nonstop and you're not tired. I see you still energized. And I think we will now keep the rest for the next episode, which is you are, in my view, the initiator of a new Hindu resurgence. Um, in the way that Vivekanand was for his time, and many thereafter, Sri Aurobindo. You've also, I think you'll be counted, you're already being counted in that line. So that story we will have in a follow-up episode
I
soon.
think that's a very important story. It's a so important story. Because that story is very complex also. You know,
Yeah.
before I got into this cause in the 90s, in the mid 90s. So think of it this way. I came here around 70, 71, and till mid 90s means about 25 years. I was into money making, profession, technology, running around the world, negotiating, beating people up in competition, and being a very aggressive business person. I mean, I would go to countries and beat out the local people in their own turf in business because I had very good technology, very good solution, very good marketing, very active, very quick turnaround, gave my people the freedom to go fight and have all the authority to go do it, back them up. So I was successful. So the first 25 years is that, and it consists of 4 or 5 different careers: mainframe career, marketing, technology career, marketing career, mergers and acquisition, international career. So even though it's all technology, but within technology, there's so many roles you can play. You can be in management and marketing, in technology. You can be in telecom or versus mainframes versus whatever. So I played all these different roles. I did not stick to one company and one career. The second part, which you can say starts part-time in the early 90s, but becomes full-time towards the mid 90s. From them till now is like 26, 27 years. That's my dharma, swadharma journey. So I've had my life divided into 2 parts equal, kind of.
Yeah.
And the second part, even that is divided into 2 parts, because first I was giving grants to Harvard to do the work, and Columbia.
And also individual scholars in India. And then you saw the waste of it all.
Yeah, first.
So we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about what all I tried. Unfortunately, there are so many other people trying to try all those things. They could listen to me. I will teach them, if you want to do it, what are the do's and don'ts, how people are going to take you for a ride. And I'll even try to convince them that that's not a good way to do it. Setting up a chair in the US prestigious
is the most useless thing you can do.
It's counterproductive because they use your money, your terminology, Indian name, chair, this, that. And the guy who gave a chair doesn't know, like I was so active in terms of looking at what they're doing, reading every word, challenging them, questioning them. These people don't know how to do that because they're not scholars. They haven't read up enough. They don't know enough about the subject matter that they're trying to change. There's a lot to be said on this. It's the disillusionment with the American institutions, disillusionment with the Indian scholars, disillusionment with then I went to the gurus, then I went to the Hindu politicians. It's one after the other disillusionment that India doesn't have the kind of framework and the kind of ecosystem that is necessary for survival. We cannot survive. Everybody's got their own little dukan.
But Rajiv, 1,000 years of slavery of the most brutal kind,
yes,
versus just a few decades, 2 decades and a half of people like you initiating a new wave of self-awareness, assertion. It just is a blip, in the entire spectrum of time that we're talking about. And but for social media, you made excellent use of it. You pioneered even that, the use of social media to get across. The mainstream media wasn't giving you attention. You made sure that you crossed that barrier. The mainstream publishing houses weren't quite willing at one time. You made sure that you defeated their containment zones. And the point I'm making is that this work is, in a way, an epochal task. It's not something you can do in a couple of decades. The damage done, I mean, Modi talked about 70 साल के गड्ढे भरने हैं और वो नए गड्ढे बनाने में लग गया. परंतु यहाँ तो 1000 साल के जख्म भरने हैं। वो सेल्फ एस्टीम जो लॉस हुआ, सेल्फ एस्टीम के लॉस के साथ इंटेग्रिटी लॉस बहुत आसानी से हो जाता है। यू विलिंग टू देन बी हैप्पी slave, intellectual coolie you call them, and people get very upset at those kind of nomenclature. But that's something that comes so easily to Indians, and we'll discuss that in the
Let's
next
do it.
episode.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you. I think you have a very good way of pulling things out, because these are not things that I normally talk about my life too much. I like to talk about the work, and I've never been autobiographical in terms of the way I speak and all that. I've never written much about autobiography and all. But you have a very good style, and you're a very dear friend. And so with somebody like you, I feel like opening up and saying, okay, here it is,
Also, people are going to want to write your biographies, and then they will need material. And I'm hoping that some of this will provide them a lot of leads. Otherwise, they'll only have your books to go by. So great talking to you, Rajiv. Stay well, stay energetic, and we'll have a follow-up session very, very soon.
Thank you very much, Madhu, and to the audience for listening. This has been wonderful. I feel that this is the right way to get back in action, is to nice, relaxed conversation about one's past and history and what lessons one has learned and the way forward.